joining us for the introduction to employee benefits. My name's Kevin Routley. I'm a partner here at Selectpath Benefits and Financial, and we put together a 4-part webinar series on employee benefits, answering your desires to learn more about your employee benefit programs. Our next webinar will be on benefit plan provisions, talking about the general provisions, the plan design, the benefit program considerations, and any cost containment options that might be available for you on your health and dental programs. Webinar 3 will be on benefit administration, which will talk about the experience from both the employee side and from the administrator side. And finally, our 4th webinar will be on Underwriting 101, talking about the basics of the costing of a program, risk tolerance of the insurance companies, funding methodologies available to employers, and how insurance companies renew your benefit program. But for now, I'm here to speak to you about our first webinar called An Introduction to Employee Benefits. The agenda for this webinar will touch on 5 aspects: group insurance theory, the Canadian landscape, group benefit products, taxability of group benefit programs, and claims distribution and trends. For the most part, group insurance is very similar to all other aspects of insurance. You can see yourself in red with a number of other employees with you. What a group insurance program is looking to do is to spread the risk of that one employee over the mass of employees. So the more employees that are within a benefit program, the greater the spread of risk. One aspect of a benefit program that I think needs to be discussed is participation. Most employee benefit insurers over a 20-life group would allow 75% of eligible employees to join the program and still be considered a viable risk. As a benefit advisor, I think it's really important for employers to understand the difference between somebody who's an eligible employee and somebody who's a waiver. An employee who's a waiver for both health and dental has applied for life and long-term disability within the program, or the other aspects of the coverage within the program to keep their eligibility open. If they were to lose their benefits on their employee benefit program through their spousal coverage, they have 30 days to join their benefit program, no questions asked. But those that straight opt out of a benefit program would be required to complete a medical questionnaire for themselves and every member of their family to become an eligible employee at a future date. So as an employer, you can see your risk of allowing employees to opt out. If you don't have it in writing that they opted out, you could put yourself in a precarious situation that an employee could blame you for them not being on the program and come back to you with some create some legal risk for you. My best advice to employers is to make your employee benefit program mandatory participation for all eligible employees. Set the eligibility of the employee and the minimum number of hours you want them to work and the classes that you want to be on the program. But once you've set that, I always recommend that you try and spread the risk as far as you can and have all employees join the program. So to look at the overall Canadian benefit landscape, healthcare is set up under 3 different tiers of our healthcare system. You have your provincial plan. In Ontario, it's called OHIP. We have private coverage or supplemental group employer-sponsored employee benefit programs and individual programs. Provincial plan coverage has evolved over the years, but it can trace its foundation back to Tommy Douglas in Saskatchewan prior to 1958, when he initiated provincial universal public hospital insurance plan. Since that time in 1958, the Hospital and Diagnostic Services Act came into effect, which was basically a statute passed by the Parliament of Canada that reimbursed 1/2 of provincial and territorial costs for hospital and diagnostic services that would be administered under the provincial or the territorial health program. Originally, when it was implemented, there was only 5 participating provinces, but by January 1 of 1961, all 10 provinces were enlisted. The federal funding was coupled with terms and conditions brought forward from the Saskatchewan Hospital Services Plan as the first universal hospital insurance program in North America. So we should be proud as Canadians that your benefit program supplements something that's for the greater good. In 1966, the Medical Care Act came into effect. That was passed by the federal government, and it offered to reimburse or cost share 1/2 of the province or territorial cost for medical services provided by a doctor. And the most important provision is doctors outside of a hospital. The prior act was in hospital. 1966, it was outside of hospitals. And finally, in 1984, the Canada Health Act replaced all of the above, and it was a publicly funded healthcare system which had dynamic reforms that were made over the 4 decades, and it was in response to changes within medicine and throughout society. The basis, however, remained the same: universal coverage for medically necessary healthcare services provided on the basis of need rather than the ability to pay. So in looking at the Canadian Health Act, there's 5 principles that guarantee Canadians a minimum standard of care. A comprehensive program, or comprehensiveness. It's where the jurisdiction must ensure that all medically necessary services provided by hospitals, medical practitioners, are working within a hospital setting. Universality. The provincial or territorial plan must entitle all insured persons to health insurance coverage on uniform terms and conditions. Portability. The provincial and territorial programs must cover the insured persons when they move to another province or territory, or when they travel outside of their province. Accessibility, probably one of the most important. It's where the provincial or territorial plans provide all insured persons reasonable access to the medically necessary hospital and physician services without financial or other barriers. And finally, the public administration details that it must be operated on a not-for-profit basis by a public authority accountable to the provincial or territorial government. So within the integration of public and private health plans, there's many things that you see in your employee benefit program that come into play. Hospital coverage. Within OHIP, for example, you're entitled to a bed. Well, at least you're supposed to be entitled to a bed. Your benefit program would top up that ward coverage to semi-private or private if you have purchased that aspect within your program. Dental program. Typically, dental is not covered by the provincial government except those on social assistance. So your employees and their families are covered under your program if you choose dental. Prescription drugs cover any drugs that are administered outside of a hospital. When you are in hospital, recovering from a surgery or for any reason to be in hospital, prescription drugs are covered under your OHIP coverage. Paramedical practitioners, which include things like physiotherapy, massage therapy, chiropractic, to name the big 3, as well as psychologists, naturopath, osteopath, speech therapy. Some programs have dietitian and acupuncture. Those are your paramedical practitioners. Medical services and supplies couples with the OHIP system under a program called Assistive Devices Program. The Assistive Devices Program provides 75% reimbursement of cost up to a reasonable and customary cost, and your benefit program supplements the other 25% in many cases. Things like mobility aids, or speech aids, or braces. Those are the types of things that could be covered by your benefit program in coordination with OHIP. Vision care. Those under 18 are entitled to vision care once every 24 months, and those over age 65. But the people in the middle, 18 to 65, are those covered under a benefit program. Both eye exams and vision care are offered by employers. And finally, out-of-Canada emergency coverage is another top-up, because within provincial jurisdiction, there's varying levels of out-of-country emergency coverage, but they don't go near as far as they need to in terms of providing you coverage at the cost that some of the hospitals are charging. So when we take a look at group benefit products, first and foremost, most benefit programs are based around life insurance. There is some carriers that allow you to build a program without life insurance, but for the most part, the life insurance companies want you to take life insurance as a base amount of coverage. It insures the employee for death from any cause. Outside of the basic life insurance that you offer, you can put on your benefit program optional coverage. Optional life insurance insures the employee and or the spouse, and sometimes it covers the children. But like most individual life insurance programs, it has a suicide clause during the first 2 years. Other than during the first 2 years, life insurance is payable upon death from any cause within an optional life program. One provision that's optional on most programs is dependent group life insurance, which covers the spouse of an employee and all eligible dependents. Usually see this as a $10,000 amount of coverage on a spouse and $5,000 on each and every child that is eligible for coverage under the program. It's payable upon death from any cause. A lot of employers use this as just a base amount of coverage for employees to have burial costs or funeral costs for their family. Coupled with life insurance is basic accidental death and dismemberment insurance. It's payable as a result of an accidental death and would double the life amount that is within the policy. So if you have a program that has a flat $50,000 of life insurance, if you died as a result of an accident, that $50,000 would be doubled to $100,000. It also includes a dismemberment and loss of use benefit as a result of any covered accident. That could be a loss of fingers from an accident, loss of use of arms, loss of speech, loss of hearing, or paralysis. Those are the base coverages for dismemberment, but you should check your employee handbook to see the comprehensiveness of the coverage, because it may also include additional benefits like spousal retraining benefit, which would allow a spouse to go back to school to train to go back into the workforce. There's also additional benefits for children based on the different insurance contracts that are out there, meaning a dependent care benefit. It could pay for some additional education or their education that they are fulfilling that might come into financial chaos as a result of an accidental death or dismemberment of an individual. Other group benefit products, there's voluntary AD&D. It's available to any employee and their eligible dependents. It's basically the same provisions as the basic AD&D. As well, other group products, and probably the one I find to be the most important and the most feel-good benefit that I see within a benefit program, the critical illness. Critical illness is a lump sum payment after somebody survives a listed critical illness for 30 days. For the most part, the big three are heart attack, cancer, and stroke. And I'm sure we can all think of friends or family members that we've lost from one of those three conditions. There's a high payout rate on those three things, but 85% of all claims for critical illness are in those three items. Other things like Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, and 20 other listed items could be covered by the various insurance companies. It's comprehensive coverage. As I say, for the dollar amount you pay, I think it has high impact. It's paid at the time of need, And outside of life insurance, where you're paying for somebody's loss of life, critical illness is paying for somebody that's surviving and helping them to fund the survival of the illness they're dealing with. Employee and Family Assistance Program is another program I think that every employer should have on their program for the cost between $3 and $5 per employee per month. An Employee and Family Assistance Program can help to provide counseling in the event of many different items. I think with the stresses of social media and the prevalence of a fast-moving world, a lot of issues come up for employees, and not many general managers or business owners are prepared to assist in the counseling. By giving a simple referral to an 800 number, they can make contact with a professional that can assist them in dealing with whatever issues they're dealing with. As far as the assistance program, there's other programs within that. I've seen the program be used for somebody who had a parent on the other side of the country. One of the parents died and they wanted to bring their mother home to Ontario. They called the Family Assistance Program and learned about the assistance available in the province of British Columbia and how it would integrate with the Ontario system to bring them home to Ontario. So, it isn't just counseling, it's an assistance program to help you with the daily rigors of life. Another aspect of group benefit programs do provide is something called Best Doctors, which is a second opinion service provided for somebody that's suffering from a critical illness. So as an example, if you came down with a cancer and you're diagnosed with cancer at your local hospital, where do you go to get a second opinion? Is there a place that you can get a second opinion? With the stretch of our healthcare dollars in our healthcare system, it's very difficult to go to another hospital and get a second opinion. Calling an 800 number puts you in contact with a triage nurse which walks you through the process of getting a second opinion, having your files transferred to that doctor, and any biopsy slides sent to be able to provide a second opinion. Other group benefit products, probably most important for employees, is disability insurance. Provides financial protection in the event of a loss or income due to an accident or illness. And it's primarily non-work related. I jokingly call it fall off the roof insurance because it covers you for the 16 hours a day that you're not working, where typically WSIB would cover an employee on the job. Disability benefits can include several different provisions. It can include salary continuance, short-term disability, long-term disability, or WSIB. Group health insurance is offered under many policies referred to supplementary health or extended health care service plans. It typically includes drugs, vision care, paramedical practitioners, other medical supplies, as we spoke about before, out of country or province, emergency coverage, and hospital accommodation. Another aspect of a group benefit program is something called a healthcare spending account. A healthcare spending account is money that's provided to an individual employee where the employee allocates a fixed amount or a fixed dollar amount for the employee to use to pay for any health or dental related expense not covered under the regular group plan. As an example, deductibles, reimbursement, or expenses that are not eligible could be reimbursed under a healthcare spending account. But those expenses must be eligible under the Income Tax Act. So a lot of employers have asked us about gym memberships under a healthcare spending account. It's not covered under a healthcare spending account because it's not recognized as a legitimate healthcare claim under the Income Tax Act. Now, healthcare spending accounts with some advisors has become a new item to replace an employee benefit program. What you need to understand as an employer is if you have a healthcare spending account, it's a defined amount of dollars or a defined contribution. Once the employee has spent their amount, they're out of money. Where a group insurance program, as we spoke to you before, is the spreading of risk. Many times, the maximums are higher or unlimited for many healthcare services. Group dental insurance is something that isn't typically covered by the government outside of those on social assistance. The Canadian Dental Association is the governing body, and from there each province that the employee lives in. Claims payments are based on the amount indicated in the provincial fee guide. So the Ontario Dental Fee Guide is shared with the insurance carriers, and somebody on a current fee guide would only receive reimbursement up to what that dentist is legitimately eligible to charge. If you ever see on a claim statement that it is over the provincial fee guide, it would mean that the dentist is charging over and above the provincial fee guide. And you have the opportunity to have a discussion with your dentist as to why they feel their services are more expensive than what their governing body has recommended. There's some that, and most benefit programs, that reimburse to the generalist fee guide, but there are some specialists out there. As an example, a pediatric dentist would charge a different fee guide than a general practitioner. Most benefit programs don't provide specialist fee guide, although it is an option to employers. Typically included services within dental are basic services, which are your checkup, your appointments, your diagnostic, supplementary basic services, which would include fillings, periodontal scaling, root planing. You have major restorative services, which would include crowns, bridges, dentures, and onlays, and orthodontic services, which is the braces that we all know as orthodontics. Survivor benefits. Survivor benefits provide coverage to an employee's dependents in an event of their death. Most benefit programs have this coverage. It typically extends for 24 months, but the time frame could be different. It could be 6 or 12 months, and it can be set up without premium payment or with premium payment. What that means is the spouse or children of an employee that has died would be covered on a benefit program for up to 24 months, either premium free or with premium payment, depending on how you set up your policy. This benefit is very low cost, and most insurance companies provide it as a general provision, but the impact that it can have on the surviving dependents is huge. Probably the biggest question we get as an advisor is the taxability of group insurance, and it can be complicated, but hopefully what I've done here is made it a little simpler for you to understand what is and is not a taxable benefit. Basic life, dependent life, AD&D, critical illness. Any premiums that are paid by the employer are taxable income to the employee. Short-term disability and long-term disability premiums that are paid by an employer are not a taxable benefit to the employee for the premiums, but if an employer pays the premiums for short or long-term disability when the employee has a claim, those proceeds are taxable in the employee's hand. So in many cases, employees are asked to pay the cost of their long-term disability coverage. So in the event that they become disabled, they receive the benefit tax-free. Many benefit programs are set up as 2/3 of basic monthly earnings. And when an employee receives 2/3 of basic monthly earnings on a tax-free basis, they're taking home almost 85% of their net take-home pay before their disability. You can see the difference that it would create when the employer pays versus the employee when they receive non-taxable dollars. Healthcare spending accounts are not taxable income for the employer. the employee. Now the health and dental program, federally, they are not a taxable benefit. Although we have heard the Trudeau government speaking about taxing health and dental programs. We hope this doesn't come to fruition, but it is something that they have been talking about with regularity. Province of Quebec, if the insured health and dental coverage is paid by the employer, it is a taxable benefit to the employees. But you'll see in the next column that if it's an ASO or Administrative Services Self-Insured policy, it's not a taxable benefit to the employee. Outside of that, I think that we've touched on most of the items within that. If there's any questions that you may have, you can make a chat within the program here. Claims distribution. Many times we get asked, what's a typical breakdown of claims, or what are most important benefits in terms of what employees are looking for? I always say the most important benefits are the ones that they use. And as an employer, if you ever want to make an adjustment to a benefit program, where you hurt the employee the most is the changes that you make to drugs, because between 55 to 70% of all claims are drug. Paramedical practitioner, 18 to 25%. This is all dependent on the individual group. For the most part, I'd suggest that a tech firm would have lower drug reimbursement but higher paramedical. Why would that be? Typically because the employees are younger. As the employees age, the drug costs go up and the paramedical use goes down. Hospital, it's not a big use benefit, although when a claim does come in, it can be pretty damaging to the loss ratio of the benefit program. Vision care, 8% of all claims are vision care if it's on a program. Medical supplies, out of country, and the other catch-all make up a small percentage of benefit costs. So when you are looking at making changes to a program where you see the spread of claims is where you can make the biggest impact to premium as well. Typical breakdown of dental claims. Many benefit programs call it basic and routine services when they put the basic and the endodontic and periodontic together. And that is 80% of all claims. 50 for basic and 30 for the periodontal. Periodontics is when a hygienist scales your teeth. Endodontics is root planing. It's work on the roots. Crowns, bridges, dentures, which is called major coverage, 10% of all claims, and orthodontics is 5%. Yeah, this is probably my favorite topic when I'm talking about a benefit program and I'm going through a renewal with an employer, because there's a lot of things that are constantly changing within benefits. What's trending most importantly are the benefits paid out in Canada have significantly increased in the past decade. Employers need to affect the issue and not the symptom. And what I mean by that is some employers look at their claims experience and see that their drug claims have gone up. Well, if drug claims go up, your premium goes up. And usually it's a reaction from an employer that, oh, my costs are going up 15% because my employees are using the drug. Let's change the co-insurance on the drug. If we lower the co-insurance, the employer will have to pay more out of pocket. Well, that affects the issue, but not the symptom. What about looking at it a different way and saying, we have employees that are taking maintenance medications that they're going to continue to need. How do we lower the cost of the drugs that are being reimbursed to the employee? Perhaps we look at a mail order pharmacy, which lowers your cost of the dispensing fee dramatically and the cost of the drug dramatically. You can save 15% on your drug spend of your maintenance medications by going to a mail order pharmacy. I'm sure employees would rather that than to have to pay 15% more for the cost of their claims. There's new illnesses that are coming on that are being seen more frequently, like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, carpal tunnel. And what we're seeing a lot in our youth is anxiety disorders. In the last couple of years, the termination rates of long-term disability claims has declined. What that means is people are becoming disabled and they're staying on disability a lot longer. So what I recommend to employers is to have a provision for employees that become disabled. Within your employee handbook, you should have something stated that if an employee becomes disabled and they're not expected to return to work, how long do you want to cover them on the health and dental program? Without a policy, you're left to do a severance agreement with the employee. With a policy, at least you have something to fall back on. If I could give you the biggest issue I'm dealing with employers right now, it's the extension of benefit coverage for an employee who becomes disabled and is not expected to return to work. So my biggest recommendation to you today would be to talk to your benefit advisor and address that issue within your employee handbook. At Selectpath, we have a human resources division that can assist you with that if you don't have human resources yourself. There's an increased focus on health and wellness. Many of you would have found this webinar as a result of the wellness letter that we share with you on a monthly basis. The addition of an employer family assistance program can really assist with health and wellness. Many employee benefit programs, online systems have health risk assessments where the employee can go in and see where they're making good choices or where they can make some adjustment to the choices that they're making. And finally, if you are interested in wellness, we do our monthly newsletter. It's put together by EWS, and they'd be happy to speak to you on your employee wellness services. Another trend is formulary, change of formulary within a drug program. At its most basic level, a formulary is a list of medicines or medications. The main function of a formulary is to specify which medications are approved to be prescribed under a particular insurance contract. There's all kinds of formularies out there. And to name a few, most benefit programs have what's called a prescription formulary, meaning your drug is covered if it legally requires a prescription by law. That being said, I'll add a caveat to that many employee benefit programs do rule out lifestyle drugs like fertility drugs or weight control therapies or erectile dysfunction drugs. Because they legally require a prescription, it's just not something that the employer wants to cover. They consider them lifestyle drugs. Over-the-counter or a prescribed benefit program is a lot deeper benefit dive. Many union contracts have that, but most employers stay away from prescribed because under a prescribed program, Metamucil can be taken off the shelf with a sticker slapped on it, the employee charges the dispensing fee, and put through a benefit program. It can prove quite costly. There's also many insurance carriers that provide a mimic of the provincial formulary, which in Ontario would cover 4,400 drugs. 4,400 seems like a lot, but it only covers about 65% of all medications that are out there. There's some programs that are national formulary that is a combination of all the provinces across the country, but still leave gaps. And there's also therapeutic formularies that employers can customize to their employee makeup. Another drug formulary is a generic formulary, either voluntary or mandatory or enhanced. What that means is a voluntary generic program would be that if you had a drug that has been made into a generic and recognized on the OHIP system as a legitimate claim, the employee would be reimbursed a generic drug unless their doctor wrote no substitutions on their script. Under an enhanced or mandatory program, the doctor would not be allowed to write no substitutions unless it could be proven that the employee has an adverse reaction to the particular makeup of a generic formulary. So in looking at drugs, there's the types of drugs that are out there are synthetic drugs, which are small, simple organic molecules that are synthesized, like aspirin, Viagra, Lipitor, etc. So it's a drug. There's generic drugs, which basically contain the same medical ingredients as the above brand name drug, but cost less. Typically, 25% of the original brand cost. And they're made into a generic after the brand name patent has worn off the brand name drug. A biologic drug is a drug manufactured from or through the use of microorganisms, which is synthesized through the DNA of the individual. Very expensive. This is what's driving benefit programs. It's what has the federal government talking about a national pharmacare strategy to deal with catastrophic drug costs. Within benefit programs, a lot of employers are dealing with the ongoing cost of their stop-loss premium continuing to rise. And it's as a result of biological drugs. To take a look at some simple biologics, these are some that we see. Stelara for psoriasis, $15,000 to $18,000 a year. Tisabri, which is MS, $25,000 to $28,000. Anemia medications, you can see the cost. Soliris, which I would think there's only about 12 cases in the entire country. If one falls on your program, it's going to be really costly. Or Orencia, which is used for rheumatoid arthritis and has a cost between $12,000 and $20,000 depending on the dosage. These are scary numbers. These are what are driving many employers to take a hard look at their program and make decisions on their stop-loss coverage. Whether they want to have stop-loss coverage, whether they want to share the cost with employees on stop-loss coverage, or whether they want to cap their drug maximum. You know, some trends that have occurred in the past, and probably one of the best things that came out of the McGuinty government that affected a lot of employers and employees was Bill 101, which lowered the generic drug pricing for private plans. In the past, Canadian generic drug pricing were some of the highest in the world. The McGuinty government looked at it, made adjustments, and were followed by many provinces across the country. Basically, they used their bully weight of the OHIP system for seniors to assist employers to get their costs down as well. And you can see that before it was implemented, when a generic came on the marketplace, it was usually about 70% of the original brand cost. But as of July 1, 2010, it was automatically dropped to 50%. And you see how it scaled back to April 1, 2012, where a generic is now 25% of the original brand cost, outside of 6 widely used generics, which is priced at 18%. This was good for employers, and this is probably why you saw your benefit costs decrease between 2011 and 2014 or 15. These things are all baked into pricing now, and things have started to trend the other way. This just shows you the patent cliff of all the drugs that all the brand name drugs that were made into generics. There's some big names on this list, and they were representing a large drug spend for employers. Back in the 2000s, when we had Lipitor or Crestor, employees were taking those drugs in record amounts at a cost of $150 to $200 a month. Those that are now taking are paying 18% of the original drug cost. Huge saving for employers, and well-placed theory by the provincial government. So that brings an end to our first webinar on the basics of group insurance. I hadn't seen any questions that came along as we were speaking to these items, But if anybody does have any questions and you'd like to ask one, you can ask one now, or you can send an email to me at kevinr@selectpath.ca. Seeing none, I wish you all well, and thank you for participating in our webinar. Bye-bye.